October 3rd. The ledger said 342 million ounces, a fortress of silver, a guarantee that the paper contracts changing hands in New York were backed by something real. Today, 24 million ounces have vanished from that category. Gone. Wall Street calls it a logistical adjustment. They say the metal is just in the wrong place. They tell you it's simply sitting in London, waiting for a ride across the Atlantic. But try booking that ride. Try moving physical bars when the premium on real metal starts mocking the spot price on your screen. We are looking at a phantom inventory, a hallucination of liquidity. The market thinks this is just another dip in the chart. But what we are witnessing isn't a fluctuation. It is a divorce. The moment the paper price in New York loses custody of the physical reality in the vault, and when the judge bangs the gavel on this separation, the settlement won't be paid in dollars. Let us look at the ledger dated October 3rd of 2025. On that day, the data from the commodity exchange, known to the world simply as COMEX, showed a fortress of silver. The eligible inventory category stood at a robust 342 million ounces. It was a number designed to comfort the market and reassure every trader holding a paper contract that there was plenty of physical metal sitting in the dark to back up their digital bets. That was the peak. Now look at the data from this morning. That number has bled out. It has withered down to 318.85 million ounces. To the casual observer scrolling through a Bloomberg terminal on a lunch break, a drop of 6.85% might look like statistical noise. It looks like a rounding error in a volatile market. But you are not a casual observer. So let us strip away the abstraction of percentage points and look at the physical reality of what just vanished. We are talking about nearly 24 million ounces of silver leaving the system. Let me visualize that for you. A standard commercial delivery bar of silver weighs about 1,000 ounces. That means 24,000 of these bars have been removed. If you were to stack them on standard reinforced pallets, you are looking at roughly 800 pallets of heavy metal. That is a convoy of nearly 40 armored trucks, lined up bumper to bumper, fully loaded, driving out of the COMEX depository gates and vanishing into private hands. This is not a rounding error. This is a massive logistical operation happening in the shadows, and almost nobody is talking about it. To understand why this matters, you have to understand the deliberate trap of terminology. The exchange divides its inventory into two categories: registered and eligible. Registered is the showroom inventory. It is the metal that has a warrant attached to it, ready to be delivered to settle a futures contract. It is for sale. Eligible inventory is different. Eligible silver meets all the purity standards to be sold, but it is not for sale. It is essentially private wealth being parked in the COMEX vaults for safekeeping. It is the garage rather than the showroom. When silver moves from registered to eligible, it just means someone bought it and decided to store it. But when silver drains out of eligible, as we are seeing now, it means something far more significant. It means the owners of that metal are taking it home. They are removing it from the exchange ecosystem entirely. They are stripping the market of its depth. It is the equivalent of a depositor not just moving money from checking to savings, but walking into the bank, demanding cash, and stuffing it under a mattress. It signals a collapse in trust. We are connecting dots here that the mainstream financial press prefers to keep separate, because seeing the full picture requires acknowledging that the system is more fragile than advertised. If you want to continue dissecting these financial autopsies with us before the narrative gets sanitized by the morning news, you should make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We track the flow of money where they don't want you to look. Now, here is where the story gets twisted. The official narrative, the one being peddled by bank analysts and market stabilizers, is the story of the wrong place. They will tell you that the world is not running out of silver. They argue that there is plenty of metal, but it is simply sitting in the wrong vaults. They point to London. They point to the vaults of the London Bullion Market Association, the LBMA, and say that the metal is there, stuck across the Atlantic. They claim that the reason COMEX inventory is dropping while prices remain volatile is simply a logistical friction. They say it is too expensive or too slow to ship that silver from London to New York to refill the draining American vaults. But investigate that claim for a second. Markets are designed to be efficient. The entire global financial system is built on the concept of arbitrage. If silver is scarce in New York and plentiful in London, the price in New York should rise until it becomes profitable to fly that metal across the ocean. That is how the machine works. That is the heartbeat of global trade. Ships and planes move commodities to where the price is highest. So if there is supposedly a glut of silver in London, why is it not flooding into New York to capture the premium? Why is the arbitrage mechanism broken? This brings us to the uncomfortable truth. If the silver is not moving, it is not because the shipping costs are too high. It is because the silver in London is not available. It might be there physically, sitting on a shelf, but it is financially locked. It is encumbered. It has been leased, released, and pledged as collateral to multiple different parties. It is wrong place silver only in the sense that you cannot get your hands on it. This suggests we are witnessing the first cracks in the Atlantic connection. The link between the world's two biggest pricing centers is snapping. If you clicked on this video looking for a hot tip on whether the silver chart goes up or down tomorrow morning so you can gamble on a quick trade, you should stop watching now. This investigation is not for the casino patrons. This data is for the people who want to know if the casino actually has enough chips to cash you out when the game ends. We are left staring at a paradox. New York is bleeding physical metal. London is allegedly full, but refusing to ship. The bridge is burning, and if the metal cannot move from where it is plentiful to where it is needed, then the global price of silver is no longer a single, unified truth. It is about to fracture. And when that fracture widens, we need to ask the question that terrifies every exchange manager on Wall Street. What happens when the paper contract says you own silver, but the vault door opens to reveal nothing but empty floor space? To understand the gravity of this eligible inventory drain, we must stop treating it as a statistic and start treating it as a kinetic event. We need to run a stress test on the system. We will call this Simulation 0. This is not a prediction of tomorrow, but a mathematical modeling of what happens when the buffer of eligible silver wears too thin to absorb a shock. Let us construct the scenario. It begins on a Tuesday morning, much like any other. The volume on the COMEX is standard until a single large entity decides to break the unwritten social contract of the paper market. This entity is a whale. It could be a sovereign wealth fund, a tech conglomerate fearing a supply chain collapse, or a consortium of family offices. They hold 5,000 futures contracts. In a normal market, they would roll these contracts over to the next month, taking their profit in cash and keeping the game going. But in Simulation 0, they do not roll. They stand for delivery. They invoke the clause that says, the paper in their hand is a claim on 25 million ounces of physical metal. The exchange computers immediately look to the registered category. This is the dealer inventory. But in our scenario, thanks to months of attrition, the registered stocks are already depleted. The cupboard is bare. This is where the complacency of the current market comes back to haunt the establishment. The exchange looks at that massive pile of eligible silver we discussed, the 318 million ounces. The exchange managers pick up the phone to the bullion banks and the private depositories. They ask, or perhaps they plead, for the owners of that eligible silver to reclassify it as registered. They need to borrow it, lease it, or buy it to satisfy the whale's demand. And this is the moment the heart of the market stops beating. The owners of the eligible silver say no. They do not care about the premium. They do not care about the health of the exchange. They are holding that metal because they fear exactly what is happening at this moment. The 300 million ounces that the world thought was a safety net turns out to be a mirage. It is private property, and the gates are locked. Now the panic moves from the back office to the trading floor. The exchange has a contractual obligation to deliver metal it does not have. This triggers the second phase of our simulation, which we call the Atlantic Wall. The COMEX, desperate for liquidity, looks across the ocean to London. The official story has always been that London is awash in silver and can bail out New York at a moment's notice. But in Simulation 0, the logistics fail. Perhaps it is a new set of sanctions complicating transport insurance. Perhaps the energy crisis has limited the availability of secure air freight. Or perhaps, and this is the most terrifying variable, the silver in London has already been rehypothecated. This means the same bars have been pledged as collateral to multiple parties. When New York calls for the metal, London freezes. The vault doors do not open. The ships do not sail. The Atlantic arbitrage window slams shut. For the first time in modern financial history, the price of silver in New York and the price of silver in London completely decouple. The global pricing mechanism fractures. We now enter the third and most violent phase of the simulation, known as cash settlement. The exchange cannot print silver bars, but it can print rules. Facing a technical default where they cannot deliver the physical commodity, the exchange declares a force majeure event. They invoke emergency clauses buried deep in the user agreement that nobody reads. They tell the whale who demanded delivery that they will not be receiving silver. Instead, they will be cash settled. The exchange forcibly closes the whale's position and wires them the equivalent value in US dollars based on the last traded price. On paper, the system worked. The contract was settled, but in reality, a theft has occurred. The whale wanted silver because they believed the dollar was losing value. Instead, they were handed back the very dollars they tried to escape, while the exchange keeps the metal. The message is brutal and clear. You can win the bet, but you cannot take the prize. You are trapped in the fiat ecosystem. This leads us to the final state of Simulation 0, which is price bifurcation. The market splits into two distinct realities. On the screen, on the COMEX, the price of silver might actually crash or flatline because the paper market has been exposed as a broken mechanism with no connection to reality. Traders flee the futures market. Liquidity evaporates, and the chart looks like a dead heartbeat. But on the street, in the physical world, the price goes vertical. If you want a physical ounce of silver in this scenario, you are not paying the $28 or $30 shown on the screen. You are paying $50, $80, maybe $100. The premiums explode. The Shanghai Gold Exchange, which deals in physical delivery, starts trading at a 40% premium over New York. We see a world where the spot price is nothing more than a historical curiosity, a number that signifies nothing, while the real economy scrambles for metal at whatever price the physical holders demand. This is not fear-mongering. This is the mechanical result of a system where paper claims outnumber physical ounces by hundreds to one. When the confidence evaporates, the ratio resolves itself not by finding more silver, but by destroying the value of the paper. The eligible inventory drain we are witnessing today is the fuse burning down toward this exact explosive payload. It is the sound of the exit doors being locked one by one. This simulation proves that the current market structure is a fair weather mechanism. It works only as long as nobody actually wants the product. But once the demand becomes physical, the math simply does not hold. We are looking at a system that is mathematically guaranteed to fail the moment the crowd realizes the theater is on fire. The only question remaining is not if this bifurcation will happen, but whether we are already seeing the ghostly precursors of it in the technical charts right now. To confirm if this simulation is already bleeding into reality, we need to look at the forensic evidence hiding in the exchange for physical market and the backwardation curves, where the smoke is already starting to rise. If we treat our simulation zero not as a fantasy, but as a diagnostic tool, we must now look for the hairline fractures in the real-world data that suggest the simulation is already running live. We are looking for the precise moment where the mathematical model of a default intersects with current market reality. The first piece of forensic evidence lies in a mechanism that most retail traders have never heard of, yet it is the primary exhaust pipe for a stress-overloaded system. It is called EFP, or Exchange for Physical. In a healthy market, EFP is a boring logistical bridge. It allows a trader to swap a futures contract in New York for a physical position in London, or vice versa. It is supposed to be a tool for arbitrage and efficiency, but in the context of our simulation, where New York is running out of registered metal, EFP transforms into an emergency escape hatch. When we see the eligible inventory in COMEX dropping by nearly 7%, and simultaneously we see a spike in EFP volumes, we are not watching standard commerce. We are watching a liability swap. The exchange is effectively telling large contract holders that they cannot have metal in New York, but if they sign this paper, they can have a claim on metal in London. Think of this through the lens of our breakdown scenario. If you are a bullion bank shorting silver in New York, and you are called for delivery that you cannot fulfill because the vaults are bleeding, you use EFP to kick the can across the Atlantic. You shift the obligation to the London Bullion Market Association. This cleans up the ledger in New York. It makes the COMEX open interest look manageable. It hides the local default. But here is the critical flaw in the simulation code. This only works if London actually has the metal and is willing to release it. If London is also tight, as the wrong place narrative suggests, then high EFP volume is not a solution. It is a shell game. It is the financial equivalent of moving deck chairs on the Titanic to the starboard side to balance the listing port side. You are not fixing the leak. You are just moving the weight of the problem to a different jurisdiction. The data suggests that this is exactly what is happening. We are seeing millions of ounces being washed out of COMEX via EFP. This tells us that the drain we see in the eligible charts is likely even worse in reality, because the demand is being artificially diverted before it even hits the warehouse receipt. It is a stealth default, paid for with a promise of London delivery that may never materialize. This brings us to a pivotal question about the architecture of this trade, and I want to pause the simulation for a moment to get your read on the psychology here. We have two interpretations of this EFP spike. Interpretation A is that this is just the market working efficiently to find liquidity in London, a standard operating procedure. Interpretation B is that this is a desperate kick-the-can strategy to mask a COMEX inventory crisis, effectively selling paper claims on London silver that might already be rehypothecated. I want you to go to the comments section and tell me, are we looking at a functional bridge or a trapdoor? Type bridge if you trust the liquidity, or trapdoor if you think New York is offloading bad debt to London. I want to see which side of the trade this community is standing on. Resume simulation. Now we move to the second, and perhaps the most undeniable indicator that our theoretical price bifurcation phase is imminent. We must look at the shape of the futures curve. In a normal market, silver should trade in contango. This means future prices are higher than spot prices. This makes sense because if you buy silver for delivery next year, you have to pay for storage and insurance. That cost is baked into the future price. But right now, we are seeing aggressive bouts of backwardation. Backwardation is the unnatural state, where the price of silver today is higher than the price of silver next month. In our simulation, this is the siren alerting us to a system failure. Why would anyone pay more for metal now than later? There is only one mathematical reason. They do not believe the metal will be available later. Backwardation is the market screaming for immediate physical possession. It destroys the profit model of the bullion banks, who rely on the carry trade. When the curve inverts, it means the trust in the future delivery mechanism has evaporated. The market is effectively saying, I do not care about your contract for December. I want the bar in my hand in October. This aligns perfectly with the drop in eligible inventory. The inventory is dropping because the smart money is grabbing the asset now, regardless of the premium, because the futures curve is telling them that later is a risk they can no longer afford to take. Finally, we apply the loadout profile to our simulation. We need to visualize the COMEX vault system not as a static bank account, but as a bathtub. We have inflows, new mining supply, recycling, and outflows, industrial demand, investment offtake. For years, the water level was stable, but the data from the last quarter shows a terrifying hydraulic imbalance. The drain is wide open. The inflow tap is dripping. We are seeing a net outflow that is persistent and accelerating. When we say eligible silver dropped 6.85%, do not think of it as a dip. Think of it as a burn rate. If we project this rate of decay forward into our simulation timeline, we can mathematically calculate the zero date. This is the date where the eligible inventory drops below the minimum threshold required to facilitate daily trading liquidity. It does not have to hit 0 ounces to fail. It just has to hit a level where the friction of moving the remaining bars becomes too high to support the paper leverage. We are watching a hemorrhage. The official story that this is just a reshuffling of assets is contradicted by the violence of the outflow. You do not empty a warehouse that fast unless you are preparing to abandon the building. The technical evidence is unified. The EFP trapdoor is being used to hide demand. Backwardation is proving that the shortage is immediate, and the loadout profile shows a system that is bleeding faster than it can clot. The mechanics of the exchange are buckling under the pressure of physical demand. But a machine does not break itself. A market does not drain itself. Someone is pulling the lever. Someone is standing at the other end of that vacuum, sucking the physical wealth out of the West and moving it somewhere else. We have proven the how, but to understand the endgame of Simulation 0, we must identify the who. And when we trace the destination of those 40 armored trucks we visualized earlier, the GPS does not end at a private vault in Switzerland. It points to a much larger geopolitical chessboard that is being set up for a checkmate against the dollar itself. We have traced the technical hemorrhage in the charts, and we have witnessed the simulated collapse of the delivery mechanism. But if we stop there, we are missing the motive. We are treating this as a banking error, when we should be investigating it as an act of economic warfare. To understand why 24 million ounces of eligible silver vanished from the COMEX ledgers since October, we must stop thinking of silver as a currency or a speculative asset. We must start thinking of it as a strategic weapon. In the simulation we are running, the entity draining the vaults is not a hedge fund manager looking for a quarterly bonus. It is a state actor. Look at the industrial arteries of the modern world. You cannot build a Tomahawk cruise missile without silver. You cannot manufacture the advanced microchips that run the artificial intelligence grids without silver. You cannot construct the solar panels required for the green energy transition without massive quantities of this specific metal. Silver is the second most used commodity in the world after oil. If you control the physical stockpile of silver, you do not just control a price chart. You control the production capacity of your geopolitical rivals. The drain we identified in Act 1, that 6.85% drop in eligible inventory, is not a random fluctuation. It corresponds perfectly with a shift in global military and industrial posturing. While Western analysts dismiss the inventory drop as a logistical quirk, the East is treating it as a resource grab. This is where the narrative of the wrong place inventory falls apart completely. The silver isn't stuck in London because the shipping lanes are closed. It is flowing east because the magnet in Shanghai is stronger than the fading gravity of New York. This brings us to the Shanghai Premium. This is the smoking gun of our investigation. For months, the Shanghai Gold Exchange has been trading physical silver at a price significantly higher than the spot price in New York. In a free market, arbitrage traders would buy low in New York and sell high in Shanghai, equalizing the price. But that equalization is not happening. Why? Because the metal leaving COMEX is not coming back. It is crossing a one-way bridge. The East is effectively saying that they do not trust the paper derivatives of the West. They are willing to pay a premium to take immediate physical possession. They are draining the COMEX liquidity pool to fill their strategic reserves. This creates a terrifying vulnerability for the United States. We are watching the deindustrialization of the West in real time. Imagine a scenario where the COMEX declares a force majeure as we simulated, admitting they have no metal to deliver. The next day, the price of silver is no longer set in dollars in New York. It is set in yuan in Shanghai. The United States loses the ability to price the very resources it needs for its own defense industry. This is the geopolitical checkmate. The BRICS nations are not trying to destroy the dollar by selling bonds. They are destroying the dollar by rendering it useless for purchasing real assets. If you have a stack of greenbacks, but China refuses to sell you the silver needed for your guidance chips unless you pay in gold or a basket of neutral currencies, the dollar's hegemony evaporates overnight. The silence from Western regulators regarding this inventory drain is deafening. You would think that a strategic depletion of a critical defense metal would trigger a congressional hearing. But there is silence. This silence suggests that they know the trap has already snapped shut. To admit the shortage is to admit that the dollar has lost its purchasing power relative to hard assets, so they maintain the illusion of abundance. They keep the paper price suppressed on the COMEX using those EFP trapdoors we exposed, hoping that nobody notices the warehouse is empty until it is too late. But you will notice. You will notice it not when you look at a stock chart, but when you try to buy a new car and the dealer tells you there is a 6-month wait because of a chip shortage. You will notice it when your utility bill doubles because the cost of solar infrastructure has exploded. You will notice it when the inflation rate stops reacting to interest rate hikes because the inflation is driven by a physical scarcity that no amount of monetary policy can fix. This is the trickle-down effect of the Great Silver Drain. It moves from the vaults of New York to the assembly lines of Asia. And finally, it lands squarely on your kitchen table in the form of a broken supply chain and a devalued currency. The mechanism is breaking. The West is playing a game of musical chairs with paper contracts, while the East is quietly removing the chairs one by one. The eligible inventory is not just a number. It is the countdown clock to a new world order, where he who holds the gold, and specifically the silver, makes the rules. We have seen the crime scene, we have identified the weapon, and now we know the motive. The only thing left to decide is what you do when the music finally stops. 2,500 years ago, the philosopher Plato described a group of prisoners chained inside a deep cave since childhood. Their heads were immobilized, forced to stare at a blank stone wall. Behind them was a fire, and between the fire and their backs, puppeteers held up objects that cast dancing shadows onto the wall. The prisoners gave names to these shadows. They studied their patterns. They bet on which shadow would appear next. To them, the shadows were the only reality. They did not know that the shadows were merely dark distortions of solid objects. Today, we are those prisoners. The cave is the modern financial system. The chains are our 401k accounts and our brokerage apps. The wall we stare at is the glowing LED screen of the COMEX ticker. We see a number flash in red, telling us silver is down 20 cents. We see a number in green, telling us it is up 10 cents. We analyze these movements with complex technical indicators. We draw lines of support and resistance on the shadows. We convince ourselves that the price on the screen is the value of the metal. But we have forgotten the fire. We have forgotten that the spot price is nothing more than a shadow cast by a paper market leveraged hundreds of times over against a shrinking pile of real assets. The investigation we have conducted today, tracing the disappearance of 24 million ounces from the eligible category, is the equivalent of a prisoner managing to turn their head for a split second. What we saw was terrifying. We saw the puppeteers. We saw that the objects, the physical silver bars, are being carried away. The drain in the COMEX eligible inventory is the physical reality marching out of the cave. While the shadow on the wall remains relatively still, hovering around $30 to keep the prisoners calm, the object casting that shadow is being loaded onto ships and transported toward the rising sun of the east. The wrong place narrative we debunked earlier is simply the puppeteers telling you not to worry about the noise behind you, to just keep your eyes fixed on the comfortable illusion on the wall. This brings us to the most painful part of this realization. Simulation 0, the scenario of technical default we modeled, is not a prediction of a distant apocalypse. It is the moment the projector bulb burns out. It is the moment the cognitive dissonance shatters. In the allegory, when a prisoner is dragged out of the cave into the sunlight, the light hurts his eyes. He is angry. He wants to go back to the darkness because the darkness was intelligible. The light is blinding. This is exactly what is happening to the Western investor class right now. The data regarding the loadout profiles, the backwardation, and the EFP spikes is the blinding light. It hurts to look at, because looking at it requires you to admit that the dollar in your pocket is a lie, and the contract in your portfolio is a vapor. Most people will choose the cave. They will choose to believe the official story that inventories are fine, that the drain is just a logistical shuffle, and that the regulators have everything under control. They will stay seated, watching the shadows dance, right up until the moment the cave collapses. But you are still watching this investigation, which means you are already standing at the mouth of the exit. You have realized that the separation of price and value is the defining event of our generation. When the divorce is finalized, those holding the paper price will be left with the custody of a shadow, while those holding the physical value will own the new world. The eligible drain is the final warning siren. It is the sound of the exit doors locking. The system is designed to keep you inside until the liquidity has been fully extracted by the insiders. They need you to hold the bag. They need you to provide the bid for their paper while they acquire the metal. Do not let them use your capital to finance their escape. The strategy for the future is not to trade the volatility of the shadow. The strategy is to own the object that creates the shadow. This path of understanding is solitary. The crowd does not want to hear that the game is rigged. They will call you a conspiracy theorist for pointing out that the warehouse is empty, even when you show them the official inventory reports. It is a heavy burden to see the cracks in the foundation, while everyone else is admiring the paint on the walls. If you are willing to carry this burden, and if you want to be part of a network that values forensic truth over comforting lies, then you need to align yourself with the community we are building here. We are not here to soothe your anxiety. We are here to sharpen your instincts. Join us. Share this investigation with the few who are ready to listen, and help us wake the others before the simulation ends. We are standing on the precipice of a great repricing, where the artificial gravity of the paper market will finally give way to the physics of supply and demand. The illusion of infinite liquidity is ending. The reality of finite resources is beginning. The shadows are fading, and the hard, cold edges of reality are coming into view. Prepare yourself, because finally, when the music stops and the lights go out in the cave, you cannot eat those paper contracts. You can only survive on what you truly hold in your hands.